Well, hello there, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. Hello and greetings from the Mile High City of Denver, Colorado.
And Plymouth, Michigan.
This is the In the Corners podcast for Monday, August 31st, 2020. Welcome to the Good Ship In the Corners for episode number 88. My name is C.C. Hawkley.
And I'm Sean O'Brien.
Hey, thanks for tuning in with us. So, Sean, just a quick note before we get started. This is your fifth episode of doing the podcast with me. And did you realize that you were on number 5?
I knew we were somewhere in that territory, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, like a big milestone or anything, but it's still a milestone. It's still a good round number, 5,
Yeah.
Got 5 fingers, and yeah, it's solid. So anyway, yeah, welcome to the program. We're trying something a little different, as you can tell with the setup here, and in the corners and our background and everything. We've got a new layout, and it's very fitting because first and foremost, we are kind of turning a corner with the podcast, and it's a matter of kind of just a shift in the site and the sin bin and what is going on the podcast platform for our website. And thankfully, we've been kind of doing double duty. Well, we have been doing double duty for a while now, in the fact that we've been covering the ECHL and the AHL. When I took over In the Corners, 2 seasons ago, I want to say, maybe even longer now. But I was specifically covering the ECHL and bringing on ECHL broadcasters to talk about their teams and stuff like that, mainly. And we've kind of segued. I've moved to the Denver area here in Colorado and started covering the Colorado Eagles. And the podcast has taken on the AHL as well. So it's been a bit of a task to cover 2 leagues, but we are now, in spite of what the logo in the lower left-hand corner of our template there says, we are now covering officially solely the AHL, the American Hockey League, and we're turning a corner here. And Sean is our official co-host. If you hadn't heard that yet, I don't know if I brought it up last episode or not, but Sean is now we are officially co-hosts of the In the Corners podcast, and we are covering the American Hockey League solely. And I feel like I dragged that on a little bit too long, but it's just, it deserved a long explanation. And I'm just thankful that Sean, you're an official part of the program and not just kind of a guest co-host for the off season.
Yeah, it's, Coach saw me on my PTO and decided that I deserved a full contract, so here we are.
Yeah, I mean, he puts pucks in deep. He gets in the corners, and he's a great guy. Loves the game, plays hard.
Good in the room. Brings a pro mentality.
had a 3-game PTO. I like that. That's a good little analogy there. Had to sign him to a pro deal. So right on. Well, yeah. So we are starting a new era at the In the Corners podcast. New website, new logo at the beginning of August, and now here at the end of August, the In the Corners podcast is AHL exclusive. And spoiler alert, we are having a ECHL exclusive podcast come back to the sin bin. We are dividing and conquering in that regard. So keep your eyes peeled for the 3 Periods podcast coming down the pike. Stay tuned for that. So anyway, so that's the announcement with the new shift in direction and everything. We will get the outline here updated with the AHL logo down below. And another real quick announcement, as you can see on the ticker below, follow the In the Corners podcast now on Twitter at In the Corners Pod. And yeah, we'll keep you guys posted. If you have any questions for the podcast coming up, feel free to submit it. So there you go. All right, let's dive into it. Let's get started. We're going to talk about the only trade to happen thus far. And Sean's a little hesitant to talk about the 6-man trade between Pittsburgh and Toronto. Being a bit of a Pens fan most of your life, it's not
a good one.
It's not good, Bob. It's not good.
Not great.
And
It very much speaks to Jim Rutherford's mindset of, I have Crosby and Malkin, must win now. But from an AHL standpoint, there are some things to kind of discuss, things that I feel like merit discussion here from what was a big impact for an NHL standpoint, but definitely has AHL ramifications. And that's what the lens we're going to take this trade in. From the Marlies side of things, I'd be shocked if Evan Rodriguez ever puts on a Marlies jersey for more than, say, 10 games. He's a bad third liner, serviceable fourth liner in the NHL at best. And that's probably good enough to keep him on the Leafs side of the street in Toronto, especially given that his strengths are more defensive specialist than offensive threat. Warsofsky going to the Marlies, I think, is a good piece for them. He's going to be missed in the Baby Pens organization. He was far and away their best defenseman last year and their captain. I don't know where they're looking to replace that production from a talent standpoint. I don't know where they're going to try and find replacement for that leadership contribution.
Right.
But I also get the feeling that this offseason is far from over regarding moves by Jim Rutherford. But Warsofsky is going to be an important leader in the Marlies room next season. But I would imagine him to take a smaller role than he had on the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton Penguins on. I would see him more in a second pairing kind of role, not necessarily being the guy that has to lead the charge every night like he did in Wilkes-Barre. I'd be shocked if he got called up to the Leafs terribly often. But, in a pinch, he is definitely a serviceable, black ace when needed.
Sure. Now, I know that this, of course, Toronto's salary cap woes are pretty widely known within the hockey community. And I want to say that this was a $3.2 million cap dump, if I'm not mistaken.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But it was the Leafs are not going to be done either. Like they need more cap space than that. But they also have a lot of guys like on their defensive front for the Leafs that like Cody Cece's contract is up, and if they have any sense to them, they will shoot him into the sun in free agency. But like they definitely still need to make moves. I'd be surprised if they extend Freddie Anderson. But the other big part that they got back in this trade too was Hallander. That was from a Penguins perspective. That was he was probably their third best prospect in what is a very bare pipeline come after him. And he's not yet touched the ice for the Penguins in the AHL or obviously the NHL, but he very much is a prospect you expect to see in the NHL at some point, probably in a middle six role. He's not exceptionally fast, nor does he really have, slick deeks or wicked pulling wrist shots, but he has a blue-collar work ethic to him, a solid hockey IQ. He wins puck battles along the boards. His coaches say that he's very coachable. He picks up things very quickly, and he responds to criticism well. And he does a good job of, despite not possessing, a very high-end skill set, he gets, the job done down low, making plays to the middle. He uses his size well. He's very much a 200-foot player, too, that can kill penalties and create offense in dirty areas, but he's never going to make SportsCenter's top 10. Now, who knows what the AHL season holds? Should he end up, coming from Europe to jump in on a spot in the Marlies? But the Marlies are going to be pleasantly surprised in the Leafs with how I feel like he's going to play out. Mm-hmm. Whereas, yes, he never played in Wilkes-Barre-Scranton, but that would have been a piece that would have been a big boost for them and was an important prospect, I felt like, in the Pens pipeline. And now he's just gone for what felt like very much an overpay by the Penguins.
Yeah, I mean, the Penguins do get Kasperi Kapanen, and I know we're not focusing on him because of, the AHL aspect of it. Like you said, we're focusing on the AHL side of this deal. And a couple of our writers, Bill Manley, our new Wilkes-Barre Scranton correspondent there, and Zach Power, who's been covering the Toronto Marlies, put out a great analysis article. And a lot of it is, before you get into the to what the Penguins got back from this deal, at least on the AHL side of things, it's going to be very interesting to see, a lot of these players, just kind of as a foreshadowing to the Penguins haul back on this. But it's going to be very interesting to see how many players stay in Europe, even when, the COVID-19 pandemic starts to calm down in North America. But, a lot of players that are on NHL or AHL contracts are being loaned to European hockey clubs and are going overseas, or they have European assignment clauses in their entry-level deals. Justus Ananen for the Colorado Avalanche goalie comes to mind, at a local level here. But, just kind of throwing that in there as a sidebar, it'll be very interesting to see how these players will be utilized this coming season. But at least, like you were saying, 2021, 22, that's something to look forward to in regards to players that at least are contracted until then.
Yeah, and it is going to be strange because, the AHL isn't going to be started until December, and Europe is clearly going to play before then. Reed Boucher from the Utica Comets surfaced in a KHL game the other night.
Yeah.
But, if you're the European club that signed these players, are you just going to let them go in December, January when the AHL comes calling? Because that seems to leave you pretty high and dry. I would be surprised if that was their, agreement was like, yeah, you come here and just hang out for a couple months until your team opens up, and then we will totally release you and let you go there. Okay.
I'm sure that agents are kind of trying to negotiate, exit clauses and trying to figure that out, and teams are planning that around. I would imagine.
I would imagine too, but I can also see a world in which the European clubs are banking on oh yeah, we'll totally do that, expecting that it's they're just not going to play, and that they're going to get the player for the whole season. So I'm curious to see when push comes to shove how some of this plays out, because I don't know if it's that clear cut at this point.
Yeah. It feels like a recurring theme throughout our episodes this offseason. It's I guess we'll just kind of wait and see. It's just we'll play it by ear and see what happens as we go along. But let's take a look at the Penguins organization, both Pittsburgh and Wilkes-Barre Scranton.
Yep. So on the flip side, Pontus Aberg is a piece that came back to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, and he is a useful AHL player, good fill-in black ace in a pinch in the NHL, kind of like what Warsofsky was on defense for the Penguins. Aberg could be that guy in a pinch, as a forward, but he's not a full-time NHL player anymore. And the thing that's the most confusing about him being a piece of this trade is it doesn't appear that, from what I've seen in reports that I've read, that he's likely to come back from the KHL at this point. Okay. So if he's not coming back, and I believe his contract expires this year with, or would have expired with Toronto and now with Pittsburgh, I don't know why he was included if he's not likely to come back from the KHL before his contract is over. And you could re-sign him, but are you really that, hard on for Pontus Aberg?
Yeah, not a huge. I say not a huge presence, but the Marlies have been to the Calder Cup final, in the past couple of years, and he was part of that team, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, but if he's not coming back, then that's kind of a bit of a head scratcher in regards to this trade, for sure.
Yeah, and if he does make it to the AHL and plays for the Baby Pens, I would expect him to have an immediate impact as someone who can still put 25 pucks in the net on a full season schedule.
Right.
But I don't think that looks very likely, just my reading of the tea leaves that I see out there right now. Mm-hmm. The prospect they did get back that is very likely to play for them is Jesper Lindgren. Mm-hmm. But he's not one that I'm super high on either. And he's going to play for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins for sure. And I think he's going to be a very serviceable defenseman for them. But I think his ceiling as a player is probably about where David Wroblewski is right now. Like, he's a 7th defenseman in the NHL, maybe a top AHL player, but I think he's more likely to be a number 3 defenseman in the AHL. He's responsible on his own end. He makes good first passes, and he has a solid hockey IQ, but his skating and foot speed kind of limit him. He doesn't really join the rush and doesn't have dynamic abilities in the offensive zone. And I think that's what's going to hold him back from being, an NHL player or even like a top AHL guy, because that's the kind of role you're looking to put players with those skills in. Those are your top 2 pairing guys, and he's not that.
Yeah, that's very difficult when you don't have. Yeah, I mean, when you don't have those skills to transfer over to, like you said, like a lower tier NHL, upper tier AHL level, and that's something that you kind of need to break through, especially in today's game. Where speed is king. It's just like you need to get back on the offensive rush to be able to help out, especially with guys. I mean, like I said again, it's a faster game than and it's been shoved down our throats for the past 15, 20 years. It's that the 21st century game is much faster than the old days and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, that just kind of relegates him to the AHL level and the kind of the mid level as a defenseman there.
And to be fair, and this is a player we'll talk about more later on, Jack Studnicka is not a fast skater. He has very average straight line speed, but he's an NHL player, and that is more because of the other skills he has to kind of compensate for the fact that he is not Kasperi Kapanen fast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just that he doesn't have foot speed, it's that he doesn't have foot speed and doesn't make up for that lack of foot speed with other good dynamic offensive skills. Still a solid defenseman in his own zone, still makes good, zone exit passes in systems that are short support, but he leaves a lot to be desired if you're looking for him to be a needle mover for offense.
Right. Well, the pain is over. You don't have to worry about breaking that trade down anymore.
I feel like I did a good job of not, really getting into how much that hurt me as a Penguins fan. Just
That's okay, man. Yeah, it's we'll see how it fleshes out. It's just...
I will say one thing. I watched the Red Wings do the we must make the playoffs every year, and really pressing on those last years of Datsuk and Zetterberg to keep the playoff streak alive at the expense of the future. And the Penguins aren't there yet of stretching it out when it's just they shouldn't be, but man, are they getting close. Trading away these first round picks and a pipeline that is that barren. The Penguins are definitely looking at this point like they're going to be bad for a handful of years because they're not stocking Wilkes-Barre Scranton because they don't have the picks.
Right.
Yeah. And it's not a good look to continue to do this.
Sure. Yeah, and that was another part of the trade that, unless you've been living under a rock, Penguins sent their first round NHL draft pick. 15th overall for 2020, but still, it's not a good thing when you trade your first rounders like that, especially when you're trying to bolster your roster for the future after Crosby and Malkin. And like you said, just make sure that Wilkes-Barre Scranton is, full of prospects, which if you don't have any draft picks, you don't have any prospects. So
yep.
That's a problem, kind of a problem. But anyway, moving on from that, we will put a little salve on the wounds there that you've acquired, and we'll go into some coaching changes in the AHL. And very appropriate, very fitting that you decided to bust out your USA national team jerseys, and nice Jim Craig up there on the wall as well.
Yep.
Kind of the elephant in the room as we started the podcast, but yeah, we've got a couple coaching changes, and both of these guys have their roots in the United States National Team Development Program. So yep. First and foremost, let's talk about the Rochester Americans, and of course they blew up their coaching roster at the Sabres and the Amerks level, and now we've got a new head coach there in Rochester, New York.
We do. And what I thought was interesting is this is not the first time the Americans have hired a USNTDP coach as their head coach.
Okay.
In 2011, they hired Ron Ralston to be their head coach, who had spent the previous year as the U17 USNTDP coach. He went 76, 55, and 18 in 2 seasons as the Americans head coach. It's good for a winning percentage, about 52%. Not too shabby. But he got 2 playoff bursts and went a big 0 for 2. So not great, Bob. But it was interesting to see that, like, there is a history of the Americans, looking in the USNTDP. But let's talk about Seth Appert here a little bit. And I went into some of the USNTDP video from the USHL and some of their college games to look at what these coaches' systems looked like at that level, and to give maybe an idea of what would translate and what the Americans fans can expect to see when their team takes the ice, because new coach, new system, it's going to look different. So for starters, when watching some of the interviews with Seth Appert, it was very, very pleasant surprise to see that he didn't just give the very standard, like, we're going to get pucks in deep. We're going to build the bond with these players. We're going to get good guys in the room. Like, he very much had a dynamic, kind of charismatic approach to him. It's something you don't see from a lot of coaches. I mean, and I went back and watched interviews with him while he was in the USNTDP, like post-game pressers and stuff like that. And he always had this, like, charisma to him. It was entertaining to watch him just talk. And I definitely still get that vibe from him. And it definitely feels like who he is, as opposed to like a show he puts on. Right. As far as how his team looked at that level and what I think you could expect to see, I definitely saw in his breakouts that you see a lot of short support along the walls. So what that means is you're going to see when defensemen recover the pucks, they're not looking to just shoot the puck up the ice and start the transition right away. You're going to see a lot of defensive passes from, like, the bottom of the circles to the half wall where the wingers and centers are, and then they're going to carry that puck out of the zone. That's what you saw a lot of at that level, and I think that that's something that will translate very well into what the Americans do. You also saw a lot of good things from them that you would expect from a developmental coach, and that definitely seems to be the cut that you take, or that the Sabres are taking, hiring him as more of a developmental focused coach. With that being said, some of those things are, you see a lot of creative attacking of the inner slot in the offensive zone. They're looking to attack the middle of the ice. Now, some cases that was players on the rush purposefully swerving in to the middle of the ice to try and force the defense back and create lanes to the outside. Sometimes that was taking lanes on the rush out to the outside and then forcing passes inside. A lot of times, too, that was cutting through the middle, dropping it off, and letting someone else walk in for a good quality scoring chance. But they definitely made it a focus to attack the inner slot, and that's smart because that's where goals are scored from. Their forecheck that they ran was much trappier than I was expecting. You didn't see, like, they asked their F1 and F2 forwards to not crash the party as often. They took more of a steer the puck carrier into the neutral zone and then get him to either just have to dump it in from the red line and rim it around hard and start the retrieval, or try and make passes into coverage. His forecheck was very much more sit and trap than press attack. Now, they did press the attack on occasion, but it was not as often, I would say.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's kind of forcing the opponent to do more of the dump and chase sort of philosophy.
He's either looking to have them dump and chase more and then have his players ready to retrieve, or he's looking to have them basically out of options and, like, well, I have to throw the puck into coverage somewhere, and one of his forwards, like his F2 or F3, picks that pass off and starts the counterattack.
Nice. Okay.
So, like I said, you wouldn't see a lot of pressure from his forecheck in their offensive zone. So they let that puck carrier come out with it a little bit and then steered him, as opposed to just put pressure on him right away, hit him, take the puck.
Right. Gotcha.
The other thing I did notice is when they got those turnovers at their blue line, they were much more likely to not take that kind of measured short support breakout approach. That was when they were looking to counterpunch. And I thought that was an interesting note, is that they would, like, if they forced the pressure in from their forecheck, got a turnover at their blue line, their defensive zone blue line, their wingers are flying. Like, they're looking to go from their blue line to the other blue line as fast as possible, which was surprising to me because that wasn't the approach they took pretty much anywhere else. They weren't very much like, let's make stretch passes from our zone through the neutral zone. They very much took a walk the puck out, short support approach, except when, like I said, they got a good turnover and they got a good stick on it right away. Their wings are going, and they're looking to transition to a 3-on-2 right away.
Gotcha. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, continue on. Sorry about that.
No. Overall, I would say that their system definitely put more pressure on their centers to perform. They are looking to have, a lot of times coming out of the zone, their centers making the zone exits puck on their stick. I saw a lot of times where they had their center make a turnover or collect a turnover from the other team in the defensive zone, and he just goes the whole way. Like, he walks it from their defensive zone all the way into a zone entry the other way. And while, yeah, when you have the offensive talent to do that, perfect. But it definitely was a system that asked its centers to be the star players. On the opposite side of that, it didn't seem like he asked his defensemen to do a whole lot, which I feel like plays into the strengths of the Americans, as Lawrence Pilet is gone. And there's not a whole lot in terms of dynamic skating defensemen in Rochester, at least as recent as last season. Now, if you look at the Sabres pipeline prospect and, like, who might come in, there also really isn't a lot of, like, oh, that's a defenseman who's going to skate the puck and look like Erik Karlsson, in the AHL. And I think that plays to the strengths because he didn't ask the defenseman to do a whole lot of that. Like, those short support passes are high percentage. He didn't ask them to make, crazy stretch passes unless, like, you're in that counterattack and they're going to be open. In the offensive zone, they're not, pinching down that often. They're pretty much just manning the points. They make a lot of D-to-D passes. They take some shots, but, like, they weren't a focus of the transition game that much. And the structure kind of allowed them to not have to be, elite players.
Right. Well, and it's good, I think, that to have a guy like on Rochester like Matthias Samuelsson, because he does have experience in the United States development program. He's a young guy too, so it's like he can still keep up with the fast and furious kind of style that younger players can play, but especially like that. I'm sure Appert has really kind of asked of his players from what you've been telling me. But the fact that the Sabres / Americans pipeline, from what I can see, at least from what they have announced, I'm sure they'll have more announcements and more signings as the offseason moves on. But right now they only have a handful of forwards, and not a lot of them. I think they're all wingers. Like, not any of them are centers. And granted, I know that online, a forward is just like, okay, you can play left wing or right wing, or you can play center. It's just kind of a catch-all. But I mean, when I see like the centerman designation on somebody, it's like, if you are coming into a program that doesn't really have a whole lot of prospects that are centermen, then what you just told me, it's like, well, I mean, does that really set them up for success? I don't think so.
I think it could be tough. It's one where, and I guess too, like, because transition is such an ebb and flow kind of game, if you don't have center talent, that doesn't mean his system won't work. It just means that if he has wings that are better at walking the puck like that, then you're going to see them take that kind of swing role. Like, if he's going to possibly force, his talented players to play center, and then just, not necessarily force, but like have them take on more of a center role, that can work too. But it was interesting to note, just watching games, of how much his centers were involved in all aspects. They were the straw that stirred the drink in that system.
Gotcha. Well, I think watching some Amherst games in the future, well, whenever the AHL season starts next year, it'll be interesting to see how well he can implement that at the professional hockey level. Because obviously, the United States development team on the national team level, rather, is going to be a lot different than dealing with professional guys that are in there. Some of them, I mean, the majority of them, mid-20s, sometimes late 20s. I mean, yeah, a lot of them in their early 20s too. Their prospects are developing, but it'll be an interesting thing to see how that transitions over, for sure.
And it's funny you say that. It's funny you say that too, because he actually was asked that question about, like, he doesn't have a lot of experience as a professional hockey coach, in air quotes, just because he's coached college and the USNTDP and doesn't have, ECHL or AHL experience. And is asked, like, what's going to happen when, you need those moments? And he goes, well, that's when I'm thankful that I have, this great support system here in Rochester. I have assistant coaches. I have the Sabres staff that have, been there and done that for a long time. And I can lean on their experience and their knowledge to help guide me through that. So, well, I think that will be an interesting part of his transition. I don't think it'll be, a huge barrier to jump over for him, because he does have, I think, a good support system there, as he mentioned.
That does help. Yeah, for sure. Well, from one coach on kind of the eastern portion of the United States to going to the West Coast for Ontario, California, the Ontario Reign, after, I want to say 60 seasons. Whoa, easy for me to say, 6 seasons with old head coach Mike Stothers. Got a new head coach out there too, and guess what? Hey, he is also part of the United States National Team Development Program. That is a big acronym, looking at that on the outline, by the way.
USNTDP, yep.
USNTDP. All right. Go for it, my friend. Tell us about John Wroblewski.
Yep, Wroblewski. So
there we go.
Last season's NTDP's U17 team that he coached, some similarities to what you saw from Seth Appert, but also some very distinct differences. I would say, from a personal standpoint, I liked Wroblewski's system more. It was more to what I would do as a coach. And one of the biggest things that I noticed is, unlike the U18 teams, kind of like more trapping forecheck, Wroblewski's forecheck is all guns all day. He is making sure that his F1 is disrupting the party wherever he goes. It was very much a pressure at all time system. And when it went well, it looked unbeatable. But when it didn't go so well, man, did they give up a lot of chances going the other way. But I very much liked the fact that it was there, and he got buy-in from every player on that team, because you cannot run forechecking systems that are just, guns blazing 24/7 without having everyone commit to that role. Sure. But it was a lot of fun to watch. That he had a very entertaining team to watch, because they attacked every time. And when you listen to him talk about what he expects from this team, that word comes up a lot. They are going to be in attack mode. And that's what we saw from his U17 team. Their forecheck was relentless. F1 crashed that party every single second he was on the ice. Their D were also very active in the transition, which is a difference from the U18 team. You would see D walk the puck from the defensive zone all the way into a zone entry. You would see them be dynamic in the offensive zone, pinch in and be part of the low cycle. That wasn't something that you saw a lot of with the U18 team. And I think that is something that could be a factor when he is in Ontario, is making his D a bigger part of the transition, the offense, joining the rush. They also had a very big playbook of breakouts, both 5-on-5 and 5-on-4. You saw a lot of the standard things that NHL teams do on the power play breakout of, we have the one guy walk up through the neutral zone and then he turns and drops it back, and the two forwards come into the zone with speed. That double drop play you saw pretty regularly from them, but they also mixed it up a lot. I saw 5-back power play breakouts where all 5 of the skaters basically come back to the goal line and they break it out. Not quite flying V, but from like a silly Disney analogy that's closer to what it looks like.
Sure.
But they also use neutral zone bumpers where they would put a guy kind of at the face-off dot at center ice. They would get the puck to him in the neutral zone. He would draw players to him, and then he would bump it out to the sides where someone came with speed and went into the zone entry. So like there was a lot of very intentional coaching going on in some of those breakouts. It was a lot more structured. But again, it was a lot of fun. They moved the puck quickly.
Gotcha.
You also saw a lot more of the wings pushing the pace. Like they were not a short support team. They were looking more to have their wings go and then make cross ice passes. So they weren't, if your defenseman gathers the puck at the bottom of the circle, he's not looking for a short pass to a winger or the center at like the top of the circle on the half wall. They're looking more to skate the puck to that spot and then go cross ice to that winger who's breaking through the neutral zone. It's something you see a lot if you watch the Tampa Bay Lightning play or if you watch the Toronto Maple Leafs play. Their breakouts do that a lot where they send both wingers to fly through the neutral zone, and that pushes both defensemen back enough to open that cross ice lane.
Okay.
And you saw that not every time, but it was definitely something their defensemen were looking for when breaking the puck out. And when it was there, they took it.
Gotcha.
One of the other things I noticed too that was really interesting is his players had a lot of patience. They were not a team that was going to just throw pucks on net. They were very methodical of working for quality chances, looking for, passes through the low slot to set up one-timers into mostly empty nets. Like they very much were not a team that was like, oh, I don't know what to do with the puck here. Just throw it on net. Like they very much had thought and precision of where they want to get shots from, how they want to generate chances. They looked a lot for what are called royal road passes, which is if you draw an imaginary line down the middle of the ice from like goal line to goal line, passes that cross that line are way more likely to have goals come from them. So if you have that pass that goes from one face-off dot in the zone to the other face-off dot, crosses that line and leads right to a shot, those are the hardest shots for goalies to stop because they have to move laterally. And that's very difficult to track the puck from side to side as well as to get the right angle and depth. So those passes are a big focus of teams in the NHL level. And you saw that focus from his team at this level.
Okay. Any overall notes or anything just to kind of sum up all of that?
Yep. I will say one of the big things that I noticed about this is you're not going to have success in the system unless you can skate. This was this because of how relentless they are, how much they played fast. There were a couple of games that I watched by them where you could tell they were tired. Like it was a second game of a back-to-back, or for whatever reason it was off the holidays, but like there were definitely games in which you could tell they were not skating well and they looked bad. Because his system very much has a focus on you're going to need to have relentless puck pursuit. You're going to need to attack. And that means you're going to need to skate your butt off. And on those nights in which you're tired or you're just not a good skater, you're going to struggle in this system.
Speaking of this system, how well, I know it's kind of a stereotype, but there's definitely some truth to it, especially covering hockey out west here for 3 seasons now. What do you think, how do you think the system is going to translate well into the Pacific Division of the AHL when you've got kind of this Wild West mentality of kind of a rough and tumble type of hockey? Obviously every team's system is going to be a little different, but how do you think, with Coach Appert bringing over the system from the development program, how well do you think it's going to translate to the Pacific Division?
Well, I think you mean Wroblewski, but yeah.
Wroblewski,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I've really had to focus to not, mix the two up because it's a new coach and a new system from the same place. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But I wouldn't be that concerned by it. Now, when hearing his introductory press conference with Rob Blake, the Kings GM, Blake said that there are some aspects of the system that we're going to put in place that are non-negotiable. Like, you're going to run some parts of the Kings system. Now, not being as familiar with the Kings system, I don't watch a lot of the LA Kings. I wouldn't be surprised if what he was doing at the USNTDP was pretty much like they ran NHL systems. So I would expect that to translate pretty well. In terms of like the rough and tumble Wild West that you see, I don't think that, like, obviously, yeah, there will be some aspects where some changes are made. But from watching, like, a lot of people don't kind of have this knowledge of how the USHL and the USNTDP work, is those U17 teams are playing, a U20 team. So they're 16-year-olds going up against 18, 19-year-old guys. They are not physical, like, they're not physical teams because they can't be. Like, you can't send a 16-year-old to be like, hey, go win that puck battle in the corner with a 19-year-old. Like, that's not going to work for you.
Right.
But so I think that their ability to develop and have success with smaller, faster, less physically inclined players against bigger, more, physical teams is something that works well and is a feather in his cap. So I don't think he's going to shy away from, fast-paced, skilled hockey just because the teams they play are a little more rough and tumble.
Gotcha. So I noticed that there was some coaching. How do I put this? There was some interesting coaching personnel announcements during the press conference as well, and some things to make note of.
Absolutely, yeah. Assistant coach Yaroslav Modry, who is a Kings alumni, who was the Reign assistant coach in previous years, is not coming back. However, it is interesting to note that Chris Height will be. He was an assistant coach with the Reign last year under Mike Stothers, and he is going to be coming back, which not supremely unusual, but it is interesting to see that. I don't think that Wroblewski had a choice in that one.
Sure.
At least it wasn't presented that way, that like Wroblewski liked him and he was going to keep him. It was more of just, he's staying and you get to hire another assistant that will probably be more Wroblewski's choice. I could be wrong about that, but that is my reading of the tea leaves. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's good to have some kind of connection with the players and the community that's already there from a previous coach, from a previous regime. But I also at the same point recognize, like, that kind of sucks if you're getting the keys and you don't get to pick your staff completely.
Right. But, like you were saying, at the AHL level, it's just kind of probably going to be expected, especially if your NHL team specifically owns the AHL club. There's going to be a desire to have, certain staff members and certain staff personnel involved with that. And so, yeah, it does kind of suck that you don't get to pick all of your co-commanders as you're leading your squad at the AHL level. But again, it makes sense because, the Kings they want certain things done certain ways, and to have their own handpicked personnel at that level, it's kind of something that does make sense. But it is kind of crappy for John Wroblewski coming in for sure. But
I also thought it was interesting too. I would have bet money that if you told me one of the assistant coaches was going to stay on the Reign, it would have been Modry, because that's Rob Blake's, former teammate. And hockey is always a, hey, do you remember that guy I used to play with? He would be great for this job.
Yeah. Yep. Good old boys club is the phrase that gets tossed around a lot. And
yeah. So I was pleasantly surprised, at least in that instance, that it was not the former teammate of Rob Blake that was sticking around, and was the other assistant coach, Chris Height.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very interesting point. Yeah, it's just, but hockey's strange like that sometimes. Sometimes you have to be like, okay, this isn't working out. I know we were teammates in the past, but the perfect example that came to head was Joe Sakic, team president of the Avs, and when Patrick Waugh was coaching there, he's just like, all right, well, this isn't working.
Patrick Waugh.
Oh, he was something else as a head coach, that's for sure. That was great. It was great in strange times in Avalanche country for sure. But I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, they didn't re-sign Yaroslav Motri, but other guys have re-signed in the AHL. So let's shift and talk about some of those.
Huzzah! Let's do it. Yep. So first and foremost, let's go to you mentioned the Detroit Red Wings and kind of their failed rebuilding system and trying to hold on to that, playoff streak that they had going under the leadership of Zetterberg and Pavel Datsyuk. Now that we're here in 2020, we're going to talk about Evgeny Svechnikov re-signing in Grand Rapids for a 1-year deal.
Yep. It's funny because every iteration that he has been in the NHL EA Sports Series games, I have purposefully gone out and traded for Evgeny Svechnikov because he always pans out as a 40-goal scorer in the NHL in those games.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, like he is one of the first trades I make anytime I get a new EA NHL game. Like it's, all right, we got to go get Svechnikov because he's going to score a bunch of goals. And yes, I mean Evgeny, not Andre. Evgeny, turns into a 40-goal scorer so reliably in those games. But then again, the EA Sports series also has Patrick Laine with a 90 defensive rating. So maybe not the best. Yeah.
Maybe not the best gauge. Yeah.
Yeah. Not necessarily nailing it from a simulation perspective. Sure. But I do like Svechnikov a lot as a prospect, but he really just has not taken that next step. And I understand he missed all of 18-19 with an injury, and 19-20 I will absolutely have, time for the argument that knee injury was still nagging him. But this 1-year deal is, in my mind, it has to be make or break. Like, if he does not ball out this year for the Grand Rapids Griffins, I have to imagine he's looking for a new team in 21-22 because he shows flashes of the high-end skill and using his frame well and making space. But, there's so many instances where it's just he's not getting on the score sheet. His defensive ability is not great. And his skating is also not superb. I would like to see that progress more. And that's going to be probably a struggle for him coming off of such a major knee injury. I'd be curious to see how he looks skating, if he's made any improvements. But first and foremost, he needs to be putting pucks in the net because at the end of the day, he needs to be on that leaderboard of AHL top scorers. Or like I said, I don't see a path for him forward in the Red Wings organization. It's been frustrating to watch for what is a talented player just not take that next step. Right.
Yeah. And virtually he may be a 40-goal scorer in the NHL, but we'll see if that'll translate over to something more based in reality this coming season, if and when that happens. So another point of interest, another point of news is the Hershey Bears re-signing veteran Matt Molson again, and also picking up a goaltender as well, and somebody that is kind of a surprise in Zach Fucale.
For sure, I was surprised they went after a goaltender, and I maybe this is hot takey of me. I don't know. But sure. If they decide to move on from Holtby, which I think they should, it's definitely a move that makes more sense as they're going to need, some goaltending depth in Hershey. Whereas if they keep Holtby, I guess he's going to South Carolina. That's kind of an odd signing. I think he's certainly an AHL caliber goaltender. But I think it's hard to really make it feel like it makes sense unless Holtby's going, which, again, I think they should let him go because he's getting older and he's going to ask for a lot of money and a lot of term, and none of those things are good.
Right. Well, Matt Molson's been around for what feels like forever. He's 36 years old. How do you feel about that veteran signing for the Bears?
I mean, he continues to be a productive player. And I mean, God bless him at 36. If you're still willing to come back and scrap through the AHL,
right.
He's clearly if he clearly thinks that he still has it left in him to pull another season together and be productive, absolutely bring him back. Keep bringing him back until he proves that he cannot, keep up anymore. That's right. Not the case. He was a very good, second line winger last year, but I also realize at 36, the number of years that he has in him that are left of that level of production is not many. It probably can't be. But if he's going to come back for another one, keep bringing him back. He seems to be well-liked by his teammates. He seems to be well-liked by the community. He's clearly putting pucks in the net on the ice. Keep bringing him back.
Yeah. And, AHL, 1 year, 2 year deals. I mean, if you can just kind of keep signing them to those and hope that it pans out. And yeah, I mean, what do you have to lose except, continuing to have that leadership in the locker room, like you were saying. I do want to comment and kind of wrap up that Hershey Bear signings with the goaltending. I want to talk a little bit about that more because, the Capitals organization, they lost Parker Milner, who was solid in net. Parker Milner and Logan Thompson were a bit of a two-headed, well, not a bit, they were a two-headed monster down there in South Carolina last season. But Logan Thompson, he's gone too because, he signed an entry-level contract with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. So, you might see him with the Fort Wayne Comets, you might see him with the Henderson Silver Knights, who knows? But, with Logan Thompson gone and Parker Milner gone, Hershey and the Capitals organization, they've had to, like you said, if Holtby is gone, they've got to get some backup in net, especially with losing, Thompson and Milner for sure, and Holtby maybe. But I think Hershey also signing University of Minnesota Duluth Bulldog star Hunter Shepard. Hunter Shepard. I was going to say Henter. That's not a word. That's not a name. Don't name your son Henter. But Hunter Shepard coming in on an AHL deal as well. That definitely helps bolster the goaltending depth. And Corey Schwartz for the Sinbin, covering the Hershey Bears, has done a great job at chronicling all that. So kudos to him for that. But yeah, the Hershey Bears definitely have a little bit of a goaltending conundrum going forward.
And I think for me too, to kind of close on that, Fucale I will openly admit I have not watched his film, but just browsing the stats and the stuff I can find, he seems like he should still be an AHL caliber goaltender. And I have to imagine that when they signed him, that was what was not promised to him, but that was probably the, what was intimated to him was you're going to be, in the Bears organization in Hershey, getting some backup starts. Because to sign him to then send him to South Carolina feels, I don't know, like I would be shocked if that's what he thought he was getting into when he signed this contract. But maybe that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, and it's crazy to see, some goaltenders will get hot and move up the ladder and some won't. And so, but can Fucale perform at the AHL level? I believe so. I would agree with you in that. But if he needs to, look at Hunter Miska. Hunter Miska was at the Colorado Eagles level pretty much all season last year, and he got called up to the Avs when Phil Grubauer got hurt. But he also played 3 games with the Utah Grizzlies last season as well. So it's like, it's stranger things have happened for sure. It's just, we'll see how that shakes out in the Capitals organization. But moving west, let's talk about Tucson and, the Arizona Coyotes rather re-signing Lane Peterson.
Yep. I was surprised because I hadn't kept up with him during the season, but I was surprised to see he only scored 16 goals because that dude has a rocket for a shot. Like, he has NHL shot velocity. And he improved his offensive outputs from last season in like a per game look at. But I was still expecting to see him, even in a shortened season, put 20, 22 home. As an undrafted young player, he doesn't have a flashy skill set or the most dynamic of skill sets. I'd like to see a little more defensive responsibility from him, but he is someone who, he has forced himself to be a part of the Coyotes prospect pipeline as an undrafted player. You don't see that. He was not on the radar of scouts and developmental coaches until, he showed up and led the Roadrunners in scoring. He very much has the drive to make the best use possible of what is not an elite offensive skill set, but he has NHL shot velocity. He is someone who can get the job done. Like I said, I'd like to see him develop a little more defensively, as I think that's going to be a more well-rounded skill set is going to be what pushes him to the NHL. But he's still someone who can drive play at the AHL level, and you always want those guys on your team.
Speaking of driving play at the AHL level, on the other side of the puck, The Henderson Silver Knights announcing their first official AHL signing. I mean, back in March, the Vegas Golden Knights announced that they were signing defenseman Jake McLaughlin to a one-year deal. But August 14th, the Henderson Silver Knights, now an official entity, signing defenseman Ryan Murphy.
I actually had to do some digging on Ryan Murphy because when I first, normally when I see a player, I'm like, all right, let's go see what my graphs say. Let's see what give me a frame of reference for what I should find here. And he didn't play in the AHL last year. He played last in, I believe it was 18-19 for Binghamton. And I didn't get to dig up any film on him. So I don't have a whole lot of analysis from that aspect, unfortunately to say. I do have a limited time of how much film I can actually watch. But
sure.
From the looks of things and trying to read some other reports on him, he looks like a good middle pairing guy in the AHL, veteran defenseman. I don't expect him to make any Vegas debuts anytime soon. But I also wouldn't expect that much offense from him at the AHL level. He did score 8 goals last year in the KHL, so maybe his shot metrics or his shooting talent has improved since his last stints in the AHL. But I definitely expect him to be kind of a solid lockdown number 4 for Henderson.
Gotcha. All right, so we went out west. Now we're going back out east. Last but not least, let's talk about the Boston and the Providence Bruins, mainly Providence, of course. Providence is re-signing Robert Lantoshi.
Yep. And again, not someone I've seen a ton of, but I think he will be a good second liner for them. I think Jack Studnicka will not be back in Providence next year, and I could see him taking some big steps forward with the organization. This is his second year in North America, and I feel like with just about every superstar European prospect, they take a little time to transition to the North American game. And in his first year, he was good for them. He was a good second liner, and he's still young and has a lot of, developing left to do. And I think that expecting him to, touch with or come close to first line production this year is certainly within the realm of outcomes for him. But I definitely think that's a good signing for them. You always want guys who can contribute on offense, and he clearly will be that for them. I think he can take steps forward.
And you want to talk about a guy that really had no trouble adjusting to the North American game, at least on the AHL level. Getting a nice NHL contract, a 3-year deal. First 2 years are a 2-way. The third year is only a 1-way NHL deal with Boston. But Dan Vladar, coming in, and obviously big news with him debuting in the NHL playoffs. We'll get to that in a second, but big debut. I put that in quotes. But yeah, I mean, with Boston re-signing Vladar, how do you expect that to really? I mean, is he going to stay at the AHL level? Is he going to be a backup if Tuukka Rask moves on? I mean, how's that work out?
Until, I just want to say before I get put on freezing cold takes, I definitely said he would not get to be playing in the bubble. But yeah, who could have anticipated that Tuukka Rask's child would get very sick and cause him to leave? Credit to him, family comes first. And then Jaro Halak.
Absolutely.
I don't even blame Halak for looking that bad, although some of those goals that he let up were not great. But man, did that team play bad in front of him. And as soon as I saw Dan Vladar, in the mask, standing outside the glass, looking at the coach, now, okay. I was like,
oh boy.
So this is happening, and I said it totally wouldn't happen. That's not great. But I don't expect him to make too many NHL appearances in next season. There's just a big logjam in front of him with 2 very capable and not yet cooked goaltenders. They are getting up there in age, and I would expect that third year being a 1-way is not that unusual. At that point, it's going to be he's either ready for the NHL or he isn't. He's going to be, I think, 26 at that point, 27. Yeah, that's if you aren't ready to be an NHL goaltender at that point, you're going to have to go somewhere else. But I still think that Dan Vladar is going to be an NHL goaltender, despite what his 2 periods of play showed. I think there are some things about his game that can still improve. He does not have elite quickness, but does have good technique, although he struggles to read or to track pucks sometimes, which we definitely saw in his debut. But again, there are some outstanding factors, which we'll get to in a second. But I think that he is going to be a reliable starter in net, but not a star goalie. I don't think you're going to see him in Vezina talks in 5 years. I would expect him to be more of I'm trying to think of a good comparable off the top of my head. Matt Murray.
Okay. Just like a solid goaltender, but just
solid goaltender, can steal you guys some games here and there. Good technique, very long, very lanky, but not a Vezina goaltender, not a someone you're going to look back and be like, we won that series because of, Dan Vladar or Matt Murray. It's nope. They did what they were asked to. They got hot a little bit here and there, but for the most part, they're just a solid, everyday goaltender.
Right. Well, and looking at Boston's non-rostered goaltenders, you've got Max Lagacé is going to be an unrestricted free agent come 2020. Well, come this coming season rather. Sorry, but you've got Dan Vladar, you've got Kyle Kaiser, then you've got Jeremy Swayman, and all three of these guys. I mean, again, if Rask decides to move on, but let me look at his contract situation for a second. Oh, yeah. He's got one more year left on his deal. So to lock up Vladar for 3 years, I think is a wise choice if Rask does move on from Boston. He is 33, but Halak is 35. So it's like you've got these two aging goaltenders. Yeah, that's just an interesting situation. We'll see how that works out as well. But
I would be surprised if Rask moves on and Halak moves on and they're both basically out. I don't think they're going to just throw Vladar in as the starter. They have a very heavy rotation there in Boston, and it seems like they're sticking with that plan. And I would not – I think the plan for Vladar is going to be get him some backup starts, get him some, spot duty, put him in 15 games the first year if you can, put him in 25 the second year, and then let him, take over the starter's reins, because there is definitely still some seasoning that he needs. And throwing him right away from an AHL job full-time to an NHL job full-time is I cannot see that working out very well for them.
Yeah. Well, we're still going to keep talking about him, but we're going to shift topics here and go into the next section of our
yeah, let's talk about this debut because
my
God.
Yeah, let's throw you and a lot of pundits are saying he should have started game 3, which I
agree with that.
In hindsight, you can do that, but yeah, go ahead, man. Yeah, you've got the floor.
I would agree with that, but I also feel like there's a ton of hindsight bias in that, where it's like, oh yeah, look how the game turned out. Of course they should. Yeah, no kidding. Everyone's a genius afterward.
Of course.
Going in, that being a back-to-back, if I were Bruce Cassidy in that moment, yeah, I start him. I put Vladar in. But I also don't put Vladar in and be like, hey, guys, just play like normal. Don't get me wrong. The Bruins, to a man, played like absolute trash that night. I felt very bad for Dan Vladar when he went in, just because it was like, hey, 5 minutes into your first NHL career start, in your first game action since St. Patty's Day, you're going to have a 40-goal scorer, have an uncontested breakaway, followed by a partial breakaway with a rebound off the end boards that no one back-checked to cover. And in the next period, last year's Hart Trophy winner is going to get a shot from the inner slot off a cross-ice pass. Sound good for you?
Oof.
There's leaving your goalie out to dry, and then there's just basically stringing him up for the Crows to pick at. Holy crap, Boston. Carolina, when they had to put a Zamboni, driver in at net, played to that, system. They knew they had to play better in front of him, and Boston did the opposite.
So, gosh, how do I follow that up? So with all that to say, we'll pick him up. We'll take him out of game 3, and we'll place him back as vacuum Dan Vladar. And just in general, aside from all of those, all of that adversity that he was facing, overall, how do you think he did?
I mean, he's definitely nervous, and that definitely played a factor into that. But I mean, it's, again, removing from context, you haven't been in game action in forever, and this is your first NHL start, and you're playing probably one of the most talented teams in hockey. Yeah, you're going to be nervous. Like, that's a normal human reaction to that instance. He did look a little bit slow as he made saves, but again, he's had some struggles with puck tracking in the past. I would have expected that, combined with nerves and all the other factors. And some of the saves he made were not ideal with form, which is why some of the rebounds were left there. Thankfully, none of those got turned into, goals against. But there were definitely some saves that he kind of let rebounds go that I don't think he would have made in, more favorable circumstances. But I try not to throw too much salt at his game at this point, because it's really hard to separate your performance from, my God, all of the things that were going on against you. Like, you haven't seen a game since St. Patrick's Day. You are in this weird situation where you're the backup. Who knows how many reps he was getting in practice before Rask left. Like, there's a lot to basically where you're like, oh yeah, he looked, slow making saves and gave up some bad rebounds because of X, Y, and Z that are not related to his skill ability. But yeah, that's probably true. So I wanted to point them out while also saying, let's not say that this is gospel on Dan Vladar from 2 periods of play, because that would be stupid.
Absolutely, especially in the pressure cooker that is the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, maybe the pressure's dialed down considerably because there is no fans, but I mean, it's still okay, this is the playoffs. I would still imagine there's nerves and everything, like you were saying. On the other side of the coin, we mentioned Jack Studnicka, and it seems like, as much as Boston just kind of threw Dan Vladar into the fire, they're being a little more cautious with Studnicka.
Yep. I also want to point out that I was right and said that he would get second line treatment, but
you need the win, especially.
I will take my L's and my W's as appropriate. But he has played very sheltered minutes, which I was surprised to see, because when I saw him, skating on second line and being in the second line on depth charts, I'm like, oh wow, they're really just going to throw him in at 16 minutes a night or whatever. And no, that's not what happened. But he's definitely been playing with second line teammates, but he's been getting sheltered minutes. And what that means is he's playing on a second line with mostly offensive zone starts against third and fourth lines. He's not being asked to do a whole lot in those minutes. He's playing with they're putting him out there in spots where he's going to be playing against lower competition from the other side with good line mates. That's what sheltered minutes means. They're managing where and when he is on the ice to maximize his ability to be effective. And I thought in those minutes he's looked pretty good. But again, sheltered minutes. There's some grains of salt to that. And also, he still has not played that much. So again, small sample size, sheltered minutes. But I thought he's looked good, and he's done the things that he did well in the AHL. He makes, good offensive choices with the puck. He makes good plays in space. His offensive creativity, he set up some good scoring chances. And I would be surprised if you don't see him in camp for the Bruins next year and making the team out of camp. I would be more surprised if he played in Providence for anything more than conditioning stints or a couple of games here or there. I would very much expect him to be with the Bruins, especially because in the roles that they've given him so far and what they've asked from him, he's done it. And I think he's done a good enough job to continue earning the trust of the coaching staff. Now, when Andre Kasha gets healthy, they're probably going to pull him from the lineup because that's kind of the role he was filling for them at 5-on-5. But I think he has done enough to warrant more looks from the coaching staff. During this bubble playoff run, I don't know. I would also see nervousness of putting him in more than what he was getting, which is 11 minutes a night, especially in, they're down, 3-1 in the series right now? Yeah, I would be shocked to see them put the rookie in for anything more than 9 to 11 minutes a night, should they put him in at all. So I think he's probably not going to see a bigger role in these playoffs. But I think going forward, the future looks bright for Studnicka and the Bruins.
Yeah. Yeah, the Bruins have always done a very good job, and I know we brought it up on this podcast before, of bringing, gosh, just really good talent in, especially during the postseason. At least it seems like within recent memory. Like it seems like their Providence system and developing prospects is really, it's been really, really beneficial for them. So it's just kind of par for the course for Boston, just to continue that, what word am I looking for? We're getting an hour into it, and words are failing me, Sean. I can't handle this anymore. Just that continuity. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah. The continuity that Boston has with their minor league affiliate there in Providence. So, all right. Well, we've talked about the playoffs. One more thing of note before we get to yet another quiz that Sean has for yours truly. Yes, says he, excellent, Smithers. We've got one thing to know, and it's kind of old news by now, but again, when you do it once a month, you're going to have that problem. But the 2021 All-Star Classic that is going to be taking place in Laval, Quebec is no more. That is going to be shifted to 2022, and it's not a big surprise that the AHL decided to make this announcement.
I was at least a little surprised at the timing of it. I wasn't surprised that they did it, but I would have figured they would have waited a little longer. I guess when you are planning a start on December 4th at the earliest, yeah, you're not going to be able to scrap together an all-star event in that time frame. But I don't know. I think for me, it was the most surprising part of it was that it's not even September and they're already killing the All-Star game. I would have thought they would have at least tried to hold out as long as possible. Which I felt would have been a little longer, a little closer to, the league starting again. But it's understandable that it's not there anymore. I'm glad that they're not going to just be like, oh, well, Laval was supposed to have it, but, well, we're going to go somewhere different for 22. I'm glad they didn't decide to do what was a very NHL thing to do there. They let Laval keep the game, and I think that's a good thing for them.
Absolutely. I think it being in Canada is another factor of that. Just with the United States and Canada.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's something that I think played a big factor into why the playoff bubbles are in Edmonton and Toronto as opposed to somewhere like Vegas and Chicago. It's a matter of Canada handling the pandemic better than the United States, at least from most aspects that I've seen. Obviously, there's a lot of news and a lot of conflicting stuff out there, but just from the figures that I've seen, that's the comment I'm comfortable making. So, yeah.
Also, too, with the border, sending them all into one country, so there isn't a, hey, you're leaving the NHL bubble and you can't go home yet because of the border. That also clears that problem. But like with the All-Star game, you're going to be going across the border and then coming back. Right. So that's probably not going to be, totally kosher by January, February of next year.
Yeah, even then. So, yeah, good on the AHL for one, bumping it back a year, and two, continuing to let Laval be the host of the 2022 AHL All-Star Game. So, all right. You know what that means. It's quiz time.
It's quiz time.
It's quiz time. I'm ready.
Stacey, you are currently, what, 3-0? 4-0?
3-0? I don't think you did a quiz the first show that we did.
I remember Eagles are legals. Junior teams are Sean's dreams.
And then the last one
Time Warp.
Was Time Warp. Yep.
So, all right. Well, here's my chance to finally, get a point on the board again. So for this week, I listened a little bit to the Syracuse Speaks podcast from our own Alexandra Ackerman, who covers the Syracuse Crunch for the Sin Bin. And she talked a lot about game-worn jerseys and her collection of those. I myself have a very large jersey collection, although none of them are game-worn. And I don't have too many AHL jerseys. So this led me to kind of look at some of those things, and it gave me the idea for this quiz. So, CC, for the purposes of this quiz, I'm going to give you $700. And then I'm going to,
make it rain.
Yep. And I'm going to give you, let me count here. I believe it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 jerseys.
Okay.
And for each jersey, you are going to have to guess what its price was at auction or as they buy it now from the team. And for every dollar that you are incorrect, you have to give one of your $700 back to me.
I see.
So if you say, just for an example here, a jersey went for $700 and you guessed $650, that means I get $50 back of your $700.
And it doesn't matter if I'm over or under.
Doesn't matter if you're over or under. Closest to the T is how we're playing.
Sounds good. We're not doing
right
rules here.
Yep. So, CC, do you feel like you understand the rules and we know where we're going?
Yeah, I understand the rules. This is definitely a little different than your last quizzes, and I think that's it may not bode well for me, but you got to lose sometime, and if I were to lose today, I'd be okay with it. So let's go.
It'd still be 3-1, so
still be 3-1
to make up here. All right. So, CC, $700 in the bank. Your first jersey up at auction here is the Cleveland Monsters Gabriel Carlsson game-worn home jersey. This was a jersey sold at auction online. For the Cleveland Monsters, Gabriel Carlsson has played 144 games, scoring 6 goals, 24 assists for 30 points, and 44 penalty minutes. The question is, CC, what did his jersey sell for at auction?
I'm going to say 3,000.
3,000.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Did I lose all my money already?
You did.
Oh, shoot.
CC, his jersey sold for $400 at auction.
Jeez. There's no barometer for this thing, man.
All right. To make it fair, I will let that be a barometer question for you. I will not count that against you, but I will take $100 from you. I believe that is a fair continuation.
That is fair. I appreciate your mercy. Thank you.
Practice round.
There you go.
All right. So our next jersey up here is Providence Bruins Peter Cehlarik signed Comic-Con weekend jersey. This is buy it now from the team. This was done online.
$800?
You are closer. This is a $600 bid. Buy it now.
There we go. Okay. Take 200 more of my money.
So CC bids 800. You are now off by 2, which puts you down to $400.
Yes.
All right. Next up, from the Tucson Roadrunners, a Braden Burke game-worn home jersey.
Mm-hmm.
This was at auction online. Braden Burke has 118 games played for the Roadrunners, 34 goals, 51 assists, 85 points, and 58 penalty minutes. CC, what is your bid?
Let's say 900.
Braden Burke game-worn home jersey went for $425 at auction.
Wow. That is really surprising. Huh.
I in fact, was surprised by that one. I would have thought it went a little higher. So.
Wow. I think I'm eliminated.
You are, in fact, eliminated.
Oh, shoot.
I will say, I'm pretty sure AHL aficionados, if you're listening, CC Hawkley has some jersey prices that he would like to share with you.
Okay, in my defense, there have been jersey auctions when I was covering the Idaho Steelheads at the ECHL level that went higher than that. And I know those guys. I know those guys at the AHL level. I'm like, okay, Burke should have gotten more, in my opinion. But then again, the Idaho jersey auctions were specialty, and a lot of them were like Pink in the Rink and, Hockey Fights Cancer and things like that. So
I think some of it, too, that works against you and kind of where your barometer for prices is those are in person after the game, aren't they?
Yes. Yes, they are. Yeah, it's
these are online after the season.
Oh, I see. Yeah. These were silent auctions, and so you had that going. So it was in person after the game, like you said.
Yep.
So yeah, that definitely skewed my mindset, and I am now 3-1, and I'll take it. That's a good 75%. Sean, take your W, good sir. Boom.
There we go. I finally got one.
Eat a W. Eat a W.
I will give you just kind of to get more into your shot here. The last jersey we're going to get was kind of a different style of one.
Okay.
This is from the Hershey Bears in 2018-19. This was an in-person post-game auction, and the money was for charity for the Tommy Foundation for Autism Acceptance.
Okay.
This was a game-worn dark jersey. This was the highest bidding jersey for Garrett Pilon. To give you a sense of what your average jersey went for, 35 jerseys sold total at this auction for a grand total of $53,850 donated to the Tommy Foundation for Autism Acceptance. So good work for the Hershey Bears. CC, this was the highest bidded jersey. What would the price that you put on Garrett Pilon's game-worn Autism Acceptance jersey?
$12,500.
Man, they really need to get you to some of these auctions.
Is it that obvious that I've never done like a jersey auction? I mean, holy smokes! I don't know. I'm just throwing figures out there. I have no game strategy for this.
Yep.
What's the real answer?
$2,600.
$2,600? I thought you said that was the highest bidded one.
Yep, it was. A lot of them, it was close though.
But they made $53,000
from 35 jerseys.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, all right. I guess that makes sense. Math is not my strong suit.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's a suit, but it's not a strong suit.
Well,
wow.
Any car dealerships in the area, if you see CC approaching on your lot.
No, don't encourage that. That's not fair. That's not fair. And I'll take my L. Just as you take your W, I'll take my L. Yep. But don't encourage car dealerships to take advantage of me in my inflated prices.
All right.
Oh God. Oh well, hour and 22 minutes. Not bad for In the Corners. We'll try and whittle that down and make it a little more consumable for like a lunch hour or something like that. But again, when you have a pod once every month, you tend to have a lot to talk about. So we'll try and we'll figure out. Maybe we'll do a bi-weekly thing like we're doing with the Tape to Tape podcast, and especially in the off season, I feel like it's just once a month. It just doesn't have, especially with all that's going on, it just doesn't have the capacity to cover everything in a shorter amount of time. So Sean and I will talk about that. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for checking out this new layout here on YouTube, and it's neat to have both of us and the background and In the Corners and everything like that. Again, follow the In the Corners podcast on Twitter at the In the Corners pod, as the ticker below is so nicely showing there. So yeah, if you couldn't tell already, that's it for the show. My name is CC Hawkley, and you can find me on Twitter at Sinbin Eagles. My Eagles articles and various other AHL articles can be found on thesinbin.net. Heck, I throw out a Utah Grizzlies article every now and again too. And I currently don't have an article in the pipeline, but you can also catch me on the Tape to Tape podcast, the Colorado Eagles podcast, also hosted on the Sinbin with Scott McDonald. And that is going to be happening next week. And you can also see that my most recent article was about Hunter Miska being called up to the Avalanche, and what the goaltending picture for the Colorado Avalanche and Eagles are going to look like in the next few years. So, Sean?
I'm Sean O'Brien. You can find me at Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SeanObrien81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien_81. You can find my stats work where I create analytics for the AHL, ECHL, and SPHL on a site called Tableau. The link for that is bit.ly/SO81-Tableau, TABLEAU. If If you guys are enjoying the show, please make sure you subscribe so that you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, please rate and review our podcast here, wherever you're listening from, so that other people can find it. Ratings and reviews help other people find the podcast when they search AHL Podcast. As well, your reviews help us improve the show. We want to give you guys more of what you want to listen to, and that's one way you can communicate with us. Again, you can also follow us on Twitter at the In The Corners Pod, down below on the ticker. And we look forward to hearing from you guys as well.
Yeah, definitely with the new platform and everything, we want fan engagement. We want to hear from you guys. So, and if you're a listener, and if you've been a listener and you enjoy what we're doing, if you'd like us even more, please consider leaving a tip in our digital tip jar at patreon.com/thesinbinhockey. That's Patreon, patreon.com/thesinbinhockey. We really appreciate your support. It means a lot to us to continue to provide coverage of minor league hockey, and now solely on the In the Corners podcast, the American Hockey League. So we love the fact that we're expanding our AHL coverage. We've got 14 correspondents currently, and we are continuing to grow this offseason. So yeah, check out the other podcasts that we have on the site. I mentioned the Tape to Tape podcast, but also check out, like Sean mentioned, the Syracuse Speaks podcast with Alexander Ackerman. And we've got another one. Well, we've got two other ones called No Holding Back with Ben Holden, and then the Three Periods podcast. So look out for those ones as well. The Hockey Talk podcast, where Matthew Harding is interviewing a lot of different people, and sometimes I jump on and interview folks too, but mainly Matthew Harding, talking with other folks and talking hockey with other folks on Hockey Talk. So, as I take a breath, until next time, everybody, thank you for tuning in to the In the Corners podcast, and thank you very much for listening. Keep your stick on the ice.